This is a KOAT Action 7 News Commitment 2020 debate special.
Welcome to this Commitment 2020 political debate. I'm Doug Fernandez.
And I'm Shelley Rabando. KOAT and the Albuquerque Journal are committed to making sure you hear from the candidates ahead of Election Day. Our partners at KKOB Radio are part of this commitment as well. They're broadcasting this debate for listeners in New Mexico. Tonight, two of the men running for United States Senate face off. It is the last debate they'll participate in before Election Day.
Let's talk about this congressional seat. Democrat Tom Udall won it 12 years ago, but he's stepping down. Now, before he won the seat, it was held by a Republican for 36 years. Now, these three men won it. Democrat Ben Ray Lujan is stepping away from representing the northern part of New Mexico in the U.S. House to run for Senate. And Mark Ronchetti left his job as a television meteorologist to win the Republican nomination, and Bob Walsh is running as a Libertarian. Mr.
Walsh is a scientist who lives in Santa Fe and has called New Mexico home for 50 years. He's been around our local politics for decades, running for Albuquerque City Council 45 years ago. He's a retired mathematician and taught classes at UNM and Sandia Labs. He describes himself as a scientist and not a politician. Based on fundraising and polling, he did not meet the qualifications to join us in this event tonight.
Tonight, I'll be asking questions along with Shelley Rabando and Kent Waltz, the senior editor of the Albuquerque Journal. Now, we are socially distanced in the KOAT studio, and the candidates are joining us remotely. Both campaigns have agreed to some rules. When one of us asks a question, the candidate gets a minute and a half to answer. I am the moderator, and I have the discretion to offer a 1-minute rebuttal. We're also going to hear from some of you tonight, viewers, who want answers from these candidates. Now, one segment features one of them asking another a question. Also, both get 2 minutes for opening statements and closing statements. Okay, the results of a hat draw have the Republican candidate going first. Mr. Ronchetti, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Doug, thanks very much, and I'd like to thank Channel 7 for this debate, and Congressman Lujan as well. As we go back and forth in these debates, I hope people get a chance to learn exactly where we stand. And, you know, when I first moved to New Mexico in 1998, I'd never been here. I didn't know a soul, and I didn't own a thing. But I quickly fell in love with the state, where I saw so much potential. Our people are the best, our landscapes are the most stunning, and our culture is unmatched. And over the last 22 years, I was fortunate enough to build a family here, and by the good graces of God and the people of this state, we're able to call New Mexico home. I know it probably seems strange that I got into the toxic world of politics. After all, my daughter, Ella, always says everybody loves the weatherman and everybody hates a politician. And I hate the toxic nature of how we treat each other too. People who disagree politically have suddenly become enemies, and it doesn't have to be this way. You'll hear us disagree tonight about a lot of things, and whoever side you're on in this election, we don't have to hate the other person on the other side. But the fact is simple. You deserve better, and that starts with demanding better from our leaders. I'm not a politician, and I have zero interest in the political fights that are now destroying Washington. Our leaders now fail to hear the people they swore to represent. And sadly, my opponent has climbed the ladder in D.C. and left New Mexico behind with nothing to show for it. Mr. Lujan is the Assistant Speaker of the House, and it's a fancy title, but at the end of the day, it hasn't meant anything for New Mexico. When you ask Congressman Lujan why nothing is getting done in Washington, he points at his political opponents, taking no responsibility for the toxic environment he's helped create. Here's a stat that sums it up. In 12 years in the House of Representatives, Congressman Lujan hasn't passed a single bill into law. I don't doubt Congressman Lujan's ambition. I doubt his effectiveness. You deserve someone who will fight for change. Enough of the titles, enough of the cheap shots that no one ever seems to win.
Your time is up. Thank you.
I'll be honored to have your support.
Congressman Ben Ray Lujan, you also have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Go ahead, please.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in during this important conversation. I'm Ben Ray Lujan. I'm proud to be born and raised in this beautiful state of New Mexico. I'm fourth generation here on the small farm in Namve, where I learned from my dad, Ben Lujan, who was a union iron worker. My mom, Carmen, who retired from the local public school district here in Milwaukee. From my grandpa Celedon and grandma Nestora, my dad's parents. My grandpa Celedon was a sheep herder to labor. My grandma Nestora had the immense responsibility of looking after the family and making sure that all that food that we were raising was going to be there, not just to nourish our family, but to nourish anyone that was in need. I learned the value of hard work, working the acequias, cleaning the barns, working in those gardens. Whatever that job was, grandma and grandpa and mom and dad, they taught me that no job was too big or too small. My mom's parents, my grandpa Luis Lujan served in World War II as a union carpenter. My grandma Cleotilde had the responsibility of raising the family while my grandfather was serving, defending our country. I learned the value of service from my entire family. It's who we are. I love New Mexico. And you're going to hear some differences about us tonight. My opponent wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The facts are simple. If the Affordable Care Act is repealed, or if the Supreme Court is successful next week in doing as President Trump has advocated, repealing the Affordable Care Act, those protections for people with cancer and diabetes go away. I'm also very proud to be working on your behalf every day. I'm proud to have passed legislation to lower prescription drug prices. I'm proud to have led initiatives to bring Democrats and Republicans together to invest in tech transfer and support New Mexico's national laboratories and New Mexico's bases, Cannon, Kirtland, Holloman, and White Sands. It's so important. And I'm also proud that 29 bills that I've authored or 10 others that I co-authored have been signed into law. It's not always about getting your name out there. It's about getting the job done for the people of New Mexico. Thanks for tuning in.
Your time is up as well. Thank you. In our first segment, we're going to tackle the topic that has touched every family in New Mexico, the pandemic, of course. Our governor has reiterated that mask wearing and social distancing is not an option if we want to get the spread under control. You are now looking at video of ads we have all seen on TV from both of your campaigns. In some of them that do not involve your family, again, do not involve your family, both of you either are not wearing a mask, or if you are sometimes not social distancing. Why is this, and what type of example is this for the voters of New Mexico? Mr. Ronchetti, you go first.
Well, Doug, I think what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we're always doing things safely. Now, in some cases, some ads may have been shot, some video you see shot earlier, and in some cases, no. But I think everyone in this campaign takes it very seriously that we need to social distance. There's no question about that. We need to wear masks where it's possible here, and we need to actually follow the science here. And so that's what's most important to us, and that's what we're doing in these cases here. But the reality of the situation is, where do we go going forward to help families? We have families right now that are suffering across this state. And at this point, we're not seeing anything get done right now in Washington. We had the CARES Act, which came through very quickly right when all of this started, and that was critical. But now we're at a point where we need a second bill to come through Congress, and we're not seeing that. And everybody is crying out for it right now. The problem is the congressman has been at the center of this. Nancy Pelosi has said from the beginning here that she wanted a second bill, but now when she has the opportunity to get one, it's not happening here, and that needs to change. And Congressman, you can step up and you can tell her, let's get this done. If you look back, Wolf Blitzer talked to Nancy Pelosi a few days ago. He said to her, why aren't you getting something done? Both sides want to do it. Ro Khanna said this from your party. Andrew Yang said this from your party. Everybody has stood up and said, let's get this done. And Congressman, you're in a position to do this, but you said nothing about working out a deal. And you can't always blame Mitch McConnell. Both sides need to come together.
Mr. Lujan, your reply.
I appreciate the question, Mr. Fernandez. And look, this is an opportunity for us to reach out to people across New Mexico, including in some of those ads that people are seeing all across our beautiful state. Now, I've been proud to put those ads together, and some of the B-roll that you're seeing there, Doug, it actually came from some of the ads I put together over the years, working the acequias, for example, walking that pasture, which is just steps away from where I'm sitting today. Every one of the ads that I've recorded this year has embraced the direction that we've been given from the public health officials to make sure we're wearing masks, that we're respecting public distancing. And this is an area where I'm so disappointed with my opponent. He says to follow the science, but he continues to hold events where he doesn't wear masks. He continues to hold large gatherings where people are not wearing masks. And he's continued to spread misinformation, just like President Donald Trump misinforming the people of New Mexico. This is serious. COVID-19 has already taken 220,000 lives across America. There needs to be a real effort from the president, who has failed every step of the way. We now know that President Trump knew how serious COVID was back in January, but he hid it from the American people. He continues to shame people that wear masks, even after he was diagnosed with COVID. Doug, this is too serious of an issue. We have to continue to work together, and that's why I'm working every day to be able to get a deal to help the people of New Mexico.
Thank you. Our next question is from KOAT anchor Shelley Rabando. Shelley.
We're entering a second spike in COVID cases, seeing record high numbers just this past week. Now that more is known about how the virus spreads, do you think the federal government should be doing more? And if so, what specifically?
Mr. Lujan, you go first.
Shelley, again, a very important question. Again, we now know that over 220,000 people have died across America, hundreds in New Mexico. We now see the highest rates of spread in our state that we've seen during this entire health pandemic. President Trump knew, and we now know because of audio tapes that have been released, President Trump knew how bad this was at the end of January, but kept it a secret. President Trump said it would go away after Easter, and it didn't. That warm weather would take it away. And so look, here's where we are. We've passed several pieces of legislation that provided relief to the people here in New Mexico, direct payments, loans and grants to small businesses, support for our local governments, for workers and people that are on the front lines, PPE and testing. But for the last 5 months, since we've been working in the House to pass package after package, several bills are sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. As much as Mark may want to deny that, Mitch McConnell has been completely absent from these negotiations. And even now that we are still negotiating a final package with the Speaker and with Secretary Mnuchin, and President Trump has said, take the bigger number, Mitch McConnell has said, no, he's not interested in even taking a bigger number that his President Trump has been advocating for. More must be done. People are hurting, people are dying, small businesses are suffering, and it did not have to be this bad. If President Trump would have been a true leader, we would have been able to save more lives and save more businesses.
Mr. Ronchetti.
Congressman, to hear this, you would think you've had no role. You would think you're not the Assistant Speaker of the House. You would think that you couldn't actually help to get something done here. You have watched as Speaker Pelosi has sat there for 3 months on this, and everybody knows what this is. This is about DC politics. This is about not wanting to give a victory to your political opponent. Everybody knows how this works. You go and put a package forward. The Senate puts a package forward. You both sit down and work it out for the American people. But when you're asked about it, Congressman, all you do is fire at the other side. And that's my problem with this. We need real leadership and not excuses. At the end of the day, you can rip Donald Trump until you're blue in the face. You can rip Mitch McConnell until you're sick of it. But the fact of the matter is, you're in the middle of this. You're the one who can help. And when you talk about the bills that you guys have in the House, included in those bills, and especially the one you just passed, are tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires on the coast, California and New York. That has nothing to do with COVID relief, and you know that's not going to get through the Senate. Number two, you also put in there the violent release or the release of violent criminals in a COVID release bill. That cannot possibly have anything to do with COVID. You know that's not going to get through. The fact of the matter is, you can put anything through the House with all sort of wish list items, but when you're ready to get something done, you can, but you've chosen not to.
Doug, can I get a rebuttal?
If you want to take a rebuttal opportunity, then Mr. Ronchetti is going to get the same, because I'm not calling for it. You're asking for it. So if you want it, he will get the same.
That's fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Mark, again, Mitch McConnell's been absent from these negotiations. The first 4 bills that we were able to put together that provided direct relief payments to people right here in New Mexico, small business loans and grants to help keep the economy moving, bringing attention to more testing that's needed because the president failed. Mitch McConnell has said clearly to even the president that he's not interested in moving the package. And that's why we in the House have been passing initiatives, putting ideas on Mitch McConnell's desk. He doesn't even give them an up or down vote, Mark. I have put New Mexico first. Everything that I'm working on is through the lens of what can be done to help the people of our beautiful state that are suffering. And Mark, when you were asked about President Trump's assessment and his response to COVID-19 with one of your debates, you said, quote, President Trump was doing very good. I don't know how you can look people in the eye and say that.
Okay, Mark, do you want to take the opportunity?
First of all, that's not accurate. Number two, what I would tell you very simply is that there you go again. You just did it. You did exactly what I said you would do, which is you didn't answer the question. You just went and ripped Mitch McConnell again. We all know how this works, Congressman. All you have to do is strip out the stuff that you know the Republicans won't agree to. Republicans will strip out the stuff they know that you guys won't agree to, and the American people and New Mexicans can get a bill. But yet again, it's not happening because it's DC politics that wins out. If no one cared who got the credit, and if no one cared who got the political benefit, we'd all be so much better off. This state deserves a senator who doesn't check the political scorecard before they make a decision.
Okay, our next question is from one of our viewers. Josiah Borchers is a business owner in Santa Fe. Here's his question.
What are the Senate candidates going to do to help open up the Santa Fe and New Mexico area for business and tourism? As small business owners and restaurateurs here in Santa Fe, we rely heavily on the tourism of people within New Mexico and out-of-towners. So my question is, what are the Senate candidates going to do to help open up our state again?
Mark Ronchetti, you go first.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have to follow the science. There's no question about that. Make sure people are social distancing and wearing their masks. I think we can all agree on that. We've got to get, again, this is where a COVID relief bill will be critical, and that'd be targeted help for businesses that have been affected. And you talk about it in Santa Fe, especially when we talk about our tourism industry, our hospitality industry have been devastated by this pandemic here. So we need to get the help to them as quickly as we possibly can here, because if we don't, they're going to continue to suffer. But as we move forward with this, that's why it's so critical to get that help to businesses who badly need it here. We also need liability protection. Let me explain that for a second. What I mean by that is, if we go forward here and we have businesses that are following the science, they've got people masking up, they've got them social distancing, they shouldn't have to worry about being sued with frivolous lawsuits, because that will destroy more businesses. Businesses in this state are hurting so badly right now, and so much has been put on their shoulders. So that's why it's critical that Congress step up here and get rid of all the garbage on either side, get rid of all the talking points, and get more help to people as quickly as they can possibly get it here. Because if we don't do that, we're going to have some real issues going forward. And I think there's one other thing we should think about here. We've got to start to return our supply chains back to the United States from China. And that could mean more jobs right here in New Mexico. But you can't get things done in New Mexico when you're siding with DC all the time.
Mr. Lujan, your reply.
Such an important question about New Mexico's economy and our small business owners and entrepreneurs who are the backbone of our economy here at home. It's so important that there is a national effort and a federal effort to defeat COVID-19. If there would have been a national response from the very beginning, and President Trump wouldn't have kept this a secret from the American people, there would have been more of an effort to use the full use of the Defense Production Act. Now, President Trump said he was going to use it for ventilators, and Mark will talk about that. But President Trump did not use it for more PPE. He did not use it to activate more testing. States were having to bid against one another. Small businesses, you know this. You were having to fight to try to find PPE. It wasn't available, and there's now another shortage because there's an increase with COVID. Mark says he wants to follow the science, but he spread the same mistruths as President Donald Trump. He said that it came out of a lab, that warm weather would make it go away, and then he said New Mexico should follow what Arizona and Texas did. But after Arizona and Texas just opened up without following the science, we saw them had to shut down again. We need to make sure we're working together to deliver real relief, more loans and grants to small businesses. And for small restaurants, independent restaurants in New Mexico, that's why I'm proud to be leading an effort in the bill that we passed that Mark Ronchetti opposes. It included relief directly to the small restaurants as well. This needs to happen, it needs to pass, and I'm still hopeful we can get this done.
All right, sticking with the economy, Kent Waltz has our next question. Kent, go ahead. Kent?
That's just another, this seems like a broken record. Because I tell you what, Congressman, if you wanted to run for president, you should have run for president, because the only person you talk about is Trump and what he's not doing. And that would be okay if you didn't have such a big role in this whole process. But you're abdicating your own role. You're giving up your own agency and handing off blame to someone else. Leaders don't do that. For too long in this state, people have wondered, what are our leaders doing in Washington? They've looked back at the days of Pete Domenici and said, where is our Pete Domenici? Where is our Pete Domenici? The Pete Domenici that was head of the budget, and Pete Domenici who passed 77 bills through to become law. The Pete Domenici that worked with a Democratic president to get 2 balanced budgets, the only time in 50 years. We don't have that leadership anymore. And we're not going to get it until we stop blaming and finger pointing and start getting things done for people.
Mr. Lujan, you have a minute as well to reply.
Mark, you're so good at denying and distracting. First off, you said it wasn't true that you said when asked about President Trump's assessment that was very good. It's on video. People can watch it for themselves. Number two, you went to your social media and said that this seat in New Mexico, that you asked for people's vote so that you could deliver another seat for Donald Trump. Well, I have news for you. This is not Donald Trump's seat. This is for the people of New Mexico. And I'm not running for the president of the United States, Mark. This isn't about me. You're the celebrity. Look, you even like doing all that reality TV and being behind the camera. I respect that. You're good at it. That's not who I am. I grew up learning how to fight and work for others and making a big difference everywhere I could. I know that no job is too big or too small, but we need to make sure that we stick by the facts. They're a stubborn thing, Mark. And that's why I hope that the rest of this conversation can be based on those facts. And maybe you can talk about your ideas as opposed to just attacking.
Now, candidates, keep in mind we have a lot of questions, not only from our panel, but from our viewers, and let's stick with that, not just ask for a debate whenever you would like. Let's go back to the economy. Kent Waltz has our next question. Kent.
The issue of guaranteed minimum income has come up during the campaign. What do you mean by that term, and what is your position?
Mr. Lujan, you go first.
So first off, my opponent has been building his entire campaign attacking me that there was a provision in the Green New Deal, which is a 13-page non-binding resolution to give people unwilling to work a paycheck. It's been debunked and fact-checked by several organizations, and it's a lie. You can go to factcheck.org, you can go to the Washington Post and Business Insider, or just go to my social media now that you're watching the debate, and we'll make sure we put it out there, number one. Number two, as we look across New Mexico, I think it's incredibly important that we look to build economic opportunity everywhere that it can be, that we look to increase wages, that we attract more manufacturing to our state, that we fight for every dollar for our national labs and for our bases, that we drive tech transfer, that we spur more opportunities in the film industry, that we support initiatives like the United States Mexico-Canada agreement, which is a trade agreement that's going to help businesses in New Mexico, including the ag sector. That's what we can do to increase opportunities, increase wages in New Mexico as we look to every tool that we can identify that's going to make a difference in people's lives. And that includes investing in education. At the local level and the state level, the state should be tapping into the Land Grant Permanent Fund to make investments in New Mexico. There needs to be initiatives at the federal level, like fully funding Title I, which brings more money to rural communities and every school district in New Mexico, and IDEA, which helps students with disabilities. That's how we can increase opportunities here at home.
Mr. Ronchetti.
Well, the congressman right there starting to run from his Green New Deal support, which I can understand because it's a horrendous bill that has no business being passed, especially not here in the state of New Mexico. Now, what the congressman is referring to is that guaranteed income provision. That was part of supporting documents that AOC wrote with the Green New Deal, which you back. So maybe you get to pick and choose, congressman. I don't know. Maybe you get to say, I like this one and not that one. But when you put your name on that bill, you supported guaranteed income. So as we look at this and we look at what we're talking about, let's talk about solutions here. What's going to drive up wages? What's going to help people in New Mexico put more food on the table for their families? What's going to help it is, number one, we have to be able to create more jobs and more competition for you. The more people that want your services as an employee, the better chance you have to start to push those wages up. What's going to hurt that? Higher taxes are going to hurt that, which my opponent supports. Higher regulations going to hurt that, which my opponent supports. We have to be able to get the economy going, especially in a COVID world. We need more demand for jobs. Number two in all of this, we have to educate our kids for the jobs that we see now. That means in some cases college, but in many cases it doesn't mean college. It means trade schools all across this state that can eventually lead to a better education and better jobs here. But one thing is for sure, it's not going to be the government forcing people to do things. It's going to be the private sector providing more opportunity.
Our debate rules allow for questions directed to individual candidates, and Shelley, you have the first one.
Mr. Ronchetti, you generally have been supportive of the Trump administration's border wall and immigration policies, but what's your position on the policies applied to the tens of thousands of amnesty seekers, which have resulted in the detention of children, separation of families, and applicants being forced to wait in Mexico before applying at ports of entry?
I think what we have right now is a broken system. There's no question about that, and we have to fix it here. So first, I think there are a variety of things we can do. Number one, let's talk about border security, because I think that's the first thing we have to do in all of this. And whether that means additional border staff, whether it means more technology in the form of cameras, or it means drones, or even if it means a border wall, we need to secure the border first and foremost here. If you go into southern New Mexico, this is an issue of safety as well. We have the drug trade pushing drugs up into New Mexico. We have the cartels here in Albuquerque, and we owe it to the people of this state to make sure we have a secure border. And so that is job number one. But beyond that, we also have to make sure that kids like the DACA kids, we can work out a deal on that. We absolutely can. Families that are genuinely here working hard, we need to be able to find out and find a legal remedy for them going forward here. We all can agree with that. My grandparents came from Italy, and when you look at the lifeblood of this state and of this country. It's immigration. It just has to be done legally. And it shouldn't take you 7 years when you do it the right way to become a citizen. So we have to streamline that as well. But I will say this, on the border funding and on the border security, my biggest concern is that my opponent voted against last year the $6.4 billion border funding bill. That border funding bill was supported by Senator Udall, Senator Heinrich, and 300 other members of the House. But Congressman Lujan would not support it. He talks a lot, but when it comes down to actually voting to benefit New Mexico, he didn't do it again.
Kent Waltz has our next directed question. Kent.
Congressman Lujan, continuing on the topic of immigration, do you believe that anyone from any country, regardless of numbers, should be allowed to immigrate to the United States as asylum seekers or people simply seeking a better life and economic opportunity as long as they don't have a criminal record? If you favor any limits on immigration, what are they?
Well, Mr. Walls, comprehensive immigration reform needs to be adopted in the Congress. There needs to be a way to bring Democrats and Republicans together. The last time that we saw an opportunity for comprehensive immigration reform, there was a bipartisan effort that we were working on in the House of Representatives when we were in the minority, and our colleagues in the US Senate passed it with Democrats and Republicans. When it came over to the House, Speaker Boehner and Speaker Ryan did not even allow for it to get an up or down vote. I'm convinced that that piece of legislation would have adopted with a super majority of Democrats and Republicans in the House and would have been signed into law. People looking to improve their lives, fleeing the most violent parts of the world. There's laws that have been adopted in the United States, signed into law by President George W. Bush, that said that if you're fleeing for your life or you're worried about your children, that you can present yourselves to federal authorities in the United States and make your case. And I think that's what the United States needs to fix. Pass the comprehensive immigration reform package to address all of these areas and continue to build upon the work that was put in place by George W. Bush. And that's contrary to what we're seeing from President Trump. President Trump's divisive policies, tearing children from their families, putting them in cages, that's no way to model the work that we should be doing in the United States of America.
Healthcare has always been a campaign focus locally and nationally. There are proposals for single-payer systems to Medicare for All, to the Affordable Care Act, and protections for pre-existing conditions. Now, this is a topic we know New Mexicans are concerned and worried about. Just listen to Leon Longacre from Nambe.
My question for the Senate debate would be, what is going to happen with the Affordable Care Act? What is going to take place? How are people going to be insured? Are we going to keep our insurance? There's a lot of people, again, with existing conditions that may or may not be covered, and I think that's one of the most important things on the ballot this year.
Mr. Lujan, you go first.
Doug, the reason the Affordable Care Act matters so much here in New Mexico is New Mexico had the highest uninsured rate before the passage of the Affordable Care Act. The importance of what the Affordable Care Act did here at home was expand Medicaid. And that's something I want to thank Governor Martinez for doing, because not all Republican governors across America embraced Medicaid expansion. We also passed important protections for people that had cancer or diabetes, pre-existing conditions. Now, to answer that question specifically, if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, here are the facts and the reality. And Mark, you can't deflect from this and deny this. Protections for people with pre-existing conditions goes away. That's bad. Protections for people that don't have to pay out-of-pocket costs when they go get their annual checkup or their preventative screenings like mammograms or colonoscopies, that goes away. Keeping your kids on your plans until they're 26, that goes away. Requiring that insurance companies cover you for mental and behavioral health or maternity care, that goes away. And that's why we have to stand strong to defend and strengthen the Affordable Care Act and look at ways that we can continue to drive down the cost of premiums for people here in New Mexico. And that's why, again, there's another piece of legislation we passed out of the House. And Mark, this is another one sitting on Mr. McConnell's desk that would lower premiums for people in New Mexico, as well as the legislation we passed to lower prescription drug prices for people in New Mexico and expand coverage for Medicare beneficiaries.
Mr. Ronchetti.
Well, here we go again. And this is another siding with DC over New Mexico. Let me be clear here. And I'll say this, I say it all the time, but I guess it doesn't matter. I support holding on to the ACA until we can replace it with something better. Very simple. It's a simple approach. I've said it a bunch, but it doesn't seem to matter. But I'll say it again, and I'll tell you why I would not get rid of the ACA before we have a better replacement. My daughter has a pre-existing condition. I'm on the ACA. I get it. I get what so many of you are dealing with, and it's the higher costs and the concern that you could be kicked off your plan. We're not going to let it happen. Not going to let it happen at all. So what would a better plan look like? A better plan, first of all, is exactly that. It would protect people with pre-existing conditions. There's no question about that. We've got to get rid of surprise billing and get rid of the middleman and the cost of prescription drugs. So we've got to bring those things down. We also have to protect Medicare and Medicaid in all of this. And we also need to protect those private employer-based plans if that's what you prefer in all of this. The concern is, where do we go with what the congressman's plan is? Because the congressman's plan, he wants to get rid of the ACA right away. You know why? Because he wants to have a total government takeover. He's going to let the government come in and decide your plan. And by doing that, that's going to raise costs. Bernie Sanders even estimates 2 to 3 times higher in taxes if his plan takes over. Less choice for your doctor, longer lines for those on Medicare and Medicaid, and rural healthcare would be hurt very badly because we're going to have fewer doctors. It's a terrible idea. We can do it, but we've got to do bipartisan work on this and not a government takeover.
Our next directed question, Congressman Lujan, in your 12 years in the House of Representatives, what is the one thing you are most proud of getting done that has made a tangible difference in the lives of New Mexicans? But also, keep time for this. Give us some examples of times you have worked across the aisle for progress. Go ahead, please.
Well, Doug, I need to make sure I respond to Mark Ronchetti's false attacks first, but let me answer your question. One of the things that I'm most proud of, Doug, and it was working with Republicans when they were in the majority of the House. Donald Trump was the president of the United States of America. There are 10 bills that I authored and co-authored with Republican partners that ultimately made it into a package to provide more protections in the same spirit that Pete Domenici always fought for, more mental and behavioral health coverage to address opioid addictions here in New Mexico. I heard from a constituent early on in my term that they were in remission, that they were doing better, they were in recovery, and they felt that craving coming on. And they went back to the facility that told them, or that helped them get better. And they were told, sorry, we can't help you unless you're using. That's just wrong. There needs to be more support for people in New Mexico. And that's just one example, Doug, where it wasn't my name that was ultimately on the final bill that was signed into law by the president, but it was my legislation and ideas that came from fellow New Mexicans, families that are struggling and suffering, and that shared with me their ideas of what must be done to make a positive difference in the lives of people here at home that are facing addiction. And that's something I'm very proud of. It was signed into law, and millions of dollars are in New Mexico now providing support and relief for the people of New Mexico.
All right, Kent Waltz has the next question directed to the Republican candidate. Kent.
Mr. Ronchetti, you're a meteorologist by trade and have said you believe atmosphere is warming. But you downplayed the importance of climate change in the California wildfires, saying fires aren't caused by anything other than a spark or a lightning strike. How do you reconcile these positions, and what would you say to someone who says climate change is not real and there is nothing to be done about it?
Well, can I disagree with the premise of the question a little bit? What I said was fires aren't caused by climate change. Fires are caused by a spark. They can be made worse by climate change. It's just that simple. And so to me, I've studied the science of the climate and especially the science of meteorology my entire adult life. And the atmosphere is warming and we do need to deal with it. But specifically talking about what's going on with wildfires, because we have the Luna fire right now up in northern New Mexico here. And let's talk about that because that really crystallizes what we're dealing with here. Our big issue is, and to me, this denies the science. If you go and say, climate change is the only driver of wildfires, you're ignorant to the science. The fact of the matter is we have so much dead and dying wood in our northern mountains that is ready to explode, and it's happening right now. Think about it when you sit in your house. You put one log on the fire, it gets warm. You put 15 on the fire, and you've got to open the windows. We have a crisis in our northern mountains. We have sent our loggers and put them out of business in places like Cuba and in grants, and it's the environmentalists, the extreme environmentalists that support my opponent that are doing this. And how extreme is my opponent on this? He supports the Green New Deal. He supports putting oil and gas out of business in 10 years. He supports not being able to responsibly log. And to me, that is absolutely ignoring the science. We can deal with climate change, but we cannot do it when we ignore some of the huge factors involved with it. And Congressman, too often you've sided with DC environmentalists over the people in this state. Loggers need your help, and they don't feel like they're
Time
getting
is up now. Our candidates, you now have a chance to ask each other a question. Mr. Lujan, you will go first. Mr. Ronchetti, you will have a minute to answer, and the congressman gets an automatic 30-second rebuttal. Go ahead, please.
220,000 people have died across America. Mark, you spread the same disinformation about COVID-19 as President Donald Trump. You went to camera and you said, you stand with Donald Trump. How can you face New Mexicans that have lost loved ones and look them in the eye and defend your assessment of Donald Trump when you were asked, which was, quote, very good?
Congressman, the ad that you clipped had nothing to do with COVID, and you know that. So the ad that you clipped was me talking about border security, and I do support border security, which you've been very soft on. We're not even sure where you stand, even after you answered the question. But I'll say this. When I agree with the president, I'll say so. When I disagree with him, I'll say so as well. I'm not afraid to call it like I see it. And you know what? I know that's hard for you because you vote with Nancy Pelosi 96% of the time. You got the position that you got because you support everything your party does, no matter how far outside New Mexico's interests that they go. So let me tell you this. What we need is a senator who will stand up in Washington and do what's best for the state. And again, keeps coming back to the COVID relief bill. You have a chance to be a leader. You have a chance to sit down and you have a chance to say, let's get something done for the American people. I promise you, if I go to Washington, I won't blame Chuck Schumer and point my finger. I'll get something done.
Mr. Lujan, 30-second rebuttal.
Mark, the answer to the question was simple. President Trump's not doing a very good job. It's been an absolute failure. And rather than you continuing to defend him and your assessment that President Trump did a very good job. Again, you said that during the debate when you were asked. It's not right. And this is an example where New Mexico needs to come first. You keep putting politics ahead of everything else, man, and it's wrong.
Mr. Ronchetti, your opportunity now to ask a question of your opponent. Go ahead.
Congressman, about a year ago, we had an issue here in the Albuquerque area, and it's one that people know. It's the Vigil case. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Miss Vigil was in her driveway getting ready to go to the gym when she was shot and killed. What we're talking about here is someone who was involved in this killing, and then he was released back out on the streets. He's back out on the streets right now. And the reason why is because of sanctuary city policies. The department, which had him set to go, did not check with immigration. Well, immigration wanted him to check with them. He didn't. So overall, this person was let back out because of sanctuary city policies. Can you say now that you'll abandon the sanctuary city policies and will get people arrested who have committed these terrible crimes?
Mr. Lujan, go ahead, please.
First, Mark, my deepest sympathies to the Vigil family for the loss of their mom and their wife, Jacqueline. I commend the APD and the federal officials who came together that actually arrested 2 individuals. And now we're learning more about those individuals that were arrested and that were charged with other crimes, but they need to be charged with that murder as well. And it's clear that even one of the people that was arrested, he had already served time and he had been deported. And that shows that there needs to be more support to be able to help our local law enforcement agencies, like with cops and burn justice grants. And in the same way that I send my deepest sympathies to Mr. Weller's family as well. That's an example where a district attorney didn't do their job and they got fired because they didn't put the criminal behind bars. And then the judge let that person off because that formula is not working. There needs to be real efforts and real reform to fix those formulas because criminals belong behind bars.
Mr. Ronchetti, rebuttal?
That's no answer when you really look at it, because you support sanctuary city policies, which again, don't allow our jails to talk to our immigration officials so people get released. You're for no cash bond catch and release. That puts people out on the streets. That was the Jackson Weller case that you mentioned. And then we also have issues within the COVID bill, you letting people out of jail early. Congressman, you're soft on crime, and all the ads in the world with you walking next to a cop aren't going to change that.
Our next question comes from Rosemary Eade. She recently moved to Santa Fe, and her question explains why.
I recently moved from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, partially because of the crime problems there. Somebody was murdered very close to my brand new house, and it was very frightening to me. So my question is, if you're elected, what will you do about the crime problem in New Mexico, specifically in Albuquerque?
Mr. Lujan, you go first.
Doug, we all know crime is a problem, not just in New Mexico, but in every corner of the country where we need to provide more help. But let's talk about home. There needs to be more support for burn justice grants and cops grants. I'm the only one of the two candidates that is before you today that has actually delivered over $133 million to local police departments so that we have more police on the streets. I'm also proud that I supported efforts like Violence Against Women Act, which is making efforts to prevent violence against women. When we lost young Ashlyn Mike, the Amber Alert system wasn't working there, so we have to work to correct that so we don't use more loved ones. And then the other program is working with Stone Garden, which also provides more support for border security. There needs to be real efforts to take the politics out of this, to make sure that we're working to deliver the resources to our local police departments. And that's something that I'm very proud that I've been working on and have consistently voted to deliver those funds to New Mexico.
Mr. Ronchetti.
Yeah, I think this is a classic example of an out-of-touch DC politician, and then you realize what's going on in New Mexico, and we have a huge issue here. So number one, let me just talk about what we can do first off and how a senator can have a huge role in that. We need more federal help to fight crime in Albuquerque. We saw that with Operation Legend. We need more of it here. And when you talk to sheriffs across the state, when you talk to police departments, they'll tell you our federal representatives don't help them enough with what they need. That's why I got the endorsement of the Albuquerque Police Department Officers Association and the Bernalillo County Officers Association as well. And I'm very proud of that because they know they'll be able to depend on me to do it. But when you look at what happens here, if we don't get more help on the ground and we don't have safety, we have nothing. But when we got that help with Operation Legend, when more police officers came in, the reaction from my opponent was, first and foremost, we don't want another Portland. Congressman, this isn't Portland. This is Albuquerque and this is New Mexico. We are one of the most violent states in the country and you've ignored it for long enough. You've been there for 12 years. I don't believe you don't care about it. I just believe you're out of touch with it. And I think when you look at where we are now, there are plenty of things we need to do, but your policies won't allow us to do it. When you talk about early release of violent criminals, when you talk about no cash bond catch and release, when you talk about COVID bills that literally pour people back out on the streets that are criminals, that doesn't say you understand the problem. That says you're siding with DC.
Well, you both
this is
mentioned
the third time he's attacked that we've not gotten a response.
No, because I think Mr. Lujan, we know who you're voting for. We know who Mr. Ronchetti is voting for. There are hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people in New Mexico who have yet to make a decision, and your answer is going to help them do that. So let's continue. Police reform is a big and controversial topic this year. Shelley Rabando has our next question for both candidates.
The Albuquerque Police Department has taken steps to change how it responds to mental health and homeless issues. Do you believe more needs to be done to change how policing is done in New Mexico? And if so, what specifically should change?
Mr. Ronchetti, you go first.
Shelley, I think we can always help and do things better than we're doing them. There's no question about that. And mental health is one of those areas that's very difficult, but I do think we can definitely make progress in doing that. Some of it's going to be additional funding, some of it's going to be new programs as well. But I want to make one thing clear. Most police are absolute heroes in this state, and they deserve that respect. I think you've seen certain aspects of this society now try to rip apart police, and I think we all know where that's coming from, and I think it's horrendous. And I think defunding the police is a terrible idea. And I know the congressman runs around with people who say those sorts of things, and I hope that he'll tell them to stop it. And I also hope he'll take the stance to be able to say he will not get rid of qualified immunity for police, because police, if they lost their qualified immunity, could be sued by someone who doesn't like the way they were arrested in a frivolous lawsuit here. But there are things that can be done specifically. Number one, there was a bill in the United States Senate by Tim Scott, and it included no chokeholds, no knock warrants, getting rid of them, police training, body cameras, and tracking bad officers. Those were all part of the bill, but the bill was killed. Speaker Pelosi killed it, Ben Ray Lujan sat there and watched her do it, and Kamala Harris killed it. We could have had 75% of what everybody was looking for, but yet again, DC politics got in the way, didn't want Tim Scott to get that credit in the election year, so they killed the bill. It doesn't have to be this way.
Mr. Lujan.
Shelley, first off, there needs to be more support for mental and behavioral health in our communities. And that's why the funding that I have fought for and delivered and that has made a difference in New Mexico, like the COPS grants and the Burns Justice grants, provide more training, and put more police officers on the streets. But there needs to be efforts doing what APD and what the Albuquerque Fire Department have done. And that's building units that respond to the mental and behavioral health challenges in our communities. That's important. Now, look, I need to respond to Mark Ronchetti's attacks here. Time and time again, Mark continues to mislead the voters on my record. The $9.7 million that was part of Operation Legend, I was advocating for that before it was called Operation Legend, Mark, and you know that. As a matter of fact, I encouraged and I pushed, and we came together as a New Mexico delegation to ask the U.S. Attorney, Mr. Anderson, to help get that money released. That meant more money in the communities to provide more partnerships with federal law enforcement agencies. We need to continue to work to do that. And then also make sure that we pass the Violence Against Women Act, which is on Mitch McConnell's desk. And look, Mark, I know you don't like civics lessons. Speaker Pelosi didn't kill the bill in the U.S. Senate. Mitch McConnell didn't have the votes to get it passed. You need to work together in both chambers. And that's why I'm proud of Republican Senator Tim Scott working with the Congressional Black Caucus and Democrats of the House to be able to come up with a package that we know can pass. And that's going to continue to happen.
Our next question is for both candidates, and it comes from Kent Waltz. Kent.
Do you favor a mandatory buyback of certain types of assault-style weapons now owned by Americans who purchased them legally, as advocated by former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who Vice President Biden has indicated will be a key player on this issue in a Biden administration? And in the context of Second Amendment, what changes, if any, do you think should be made to gun laws and regulations?
Mr. Lujan, you go first.
Ken, we can have both gun safety and reduce gun violence in New Mexico and across America and protect the Second Amendment. I do not agree with mandatory buybacks just as you prescribed, but I do support voluntary buybacks where gun owners have that choice. It's up to them. How can they work together to get that done? Now, when we talk about reducing gun violence, that's an area that we should all agree on, that we should be working towards here in New Mexico, not just with more support for our police departments, but being able to pass common sense reforms like mandatory background checks. That's something that everyone should agree on. When I was a kid growing up in a house where we grew up with guns, we were hunting. And by the way, we need to protect those hunting traditions in New Mexico. That's something that is important to me with the family that I was raised in. But we also need to see what we can do to talk about gun safety and pass those reforms with more gun locks and gun safes. Those are things that we can do to come together. And then, by the way, why can't the federal government come together, Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate, to overturn something called the Dickey Amendment? That was legislation that prevented taxpayer dollars from being used to investigate gun violence. We should all agree that this is something we have to tackle. Kids shouldn't have to go to school worried that they're going to get shot. But look, law-abiding citizens that are following the law, they also need to be able to defend themselves.
Mr. Ronchetti.
Look, I think a couple things. No, I don't support mandatory gun buybacks in any way, shape, or form. Law-abiding citizens in New Mexico are entitled to their guns. And the problem is, and I think the reason people are scared is because of the language that you see from people like Beto O'Rourke and from Vice President Biden saying that, hey, Beto O'Rourke's going to be in charge of coming to get your guns. And I think people look at you, Congressman, and they say, well, I appreciate you standing up for that, but you vote with your party 96% of the time. So if that's the case, are you really going to stand up to them on guns and say, we're not going to go get law-abiding citizens' guns? I think that's the concern here. But there are things that can be done. And I think one thing we need to look at here is looking at the possibility of getting mental health wrapped into what we're dealing with on guns. We need to understand this. Chuck Grassley went and put a bill in front of the Senate in 2018. Now, the bill didn't make it. But at least we should start to look at what we can do to make sure that we have common sense reforms here that make sense to people. And mental health is something we need to continue to look at on all of this. But the problem here really, it isn't law-abiding citizens who should be able to keep their guns. The problem is violent criminals who have guns in New Mexico. And part of that issue is what we're dealing with here. And Congressman Lujan, I appreciate you trying to get the $9.6 million from the feds to fight crime in Albuquerque. The reason we didn't get it is because of your sanctuary city policy that has released a criminal that was involved in the V-Hill killing right now. So that's why we didn't have it. So that's the kind of policy that hurts us, Congressman.
Our next question is from Shelley Rabando, and Mr. Ronchetti, you will go first.
China has become increasingly aggressive. Now that it's cracked down on Hong Kong, it has ramped up threats on Taiwan. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has approved the sale of fighter jets, tanks, and Stinger missiles to Taiwan. What do you believe our position should be towards China's aggression in the region? And should the U.S. recognize Taiwanese independence in defiance of China's One China policy?
Yeah, I think China's gotten increasingly aggressive. And I think what's happened here with the COVID-19 cases shown us that China's flat out a bad actor. They knew about COVID-19 well before anybody else. They knew what it did as it rolled across China, and they told nobody. And so now we face an increasingly dangerous China. And for the next 20 to 30 years, that's going to be the battle that we are going to face here. So we have to do a variety of things. First of all, we have to strengthen our alliances. There's no doubt about that, not only in areas that especially surround the South China Sea, but also with our other allies as well, because we need to know exactly what China is all about. And by doing that, we have to hold them accountable. They've been stealing our intellectual property for decades, and our leaders have watched them do it. Ben Ray Lujan had a front row seat for the past 12 years watching these guys, and nobody said anything, and he wasn't alone in that. There were plenty of other people who shipped our jobs overseas. It's time to bring our jobs back here. It's time to bring the critical supply chains back here. There's no question about that. And when we do it, we're going to have less reliance on China, which is critical in all of this. But remember one other thing, too, and I don't think anybody's talking about this enough. China is by far the worst human rights violator in the world. They have 1 million Muslims in concentration camps right now. What they are and what they are doing with these Muslims is disgusting. And it's time to call out China for what they are. Stop making excuses for them and start to realize we're going to have to deal with them and defeat them over the next 20 years.
Mr. Lujan.
China has to be held accountable for all of their abuses. I'm going to start off with where Mark left off, and this is an area that we agree. The human rights abuses with the Uyghurs that we continue to see with the Chinese is absolutely disgusting, and the full weight of the United States with our allies needs to put sanctions on China. In addition to what we continue to see from China, including trying to steal intellectual property, and there's still investigations underway associated with stealing proprietary information, even with our solutions to COVID-19 when it comes to important medications that might help people get better. We continue to see China abusing intellectual property theft across the world, and including right here in America. And as well, those policies that Mark said that need to be overturned, that actually encourage more jobs to be taken to China, I agree with that assessment. We need to make sure we stop every effort that is encouraging corporations in America from leaving the United States. And one of the provisions tucked into the Republican tax scam that Mark Ronchetti said didn't go far enough for corporations actually made it easier for companies to take jobs outside of the United States. It gave them a better tax incentive. That's not right. You should get tax incentives for bringing jobs back to America, back to New Mexico. And so everything that we can be doing across the United States and through the presidency should be done to hold China accountable.
All right, the time for debate questions is up. We are now moving to closing statements because Mr. Ronchetti went first on openings. Ben Ray Lujan, you will go first, and you have 2 minutes.
Again, to everyone, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This is an important election. And I want to thank each and every one of you that has already voted throughout New Mexico. We're seeing record turnout. You're getting in line to vote early. You're returning your mail ballots. And I want to encourage all of you that haven't returned your mail ballots, please get them returned. Again, I'm Ben Ray Lujan. I'm asking for your support, and I hope to earn your vote for the United States Senate. I've been proud to learn from incredible leaders and others that are here from New Mexico, like my mom and my dad, leaders like Manuel Lujan, Pete Domenici, Tom Udall, Jeff Bingaman. They were honored to earn the support of their colleagues, and they served in leadership positions. It allowed for them to make sure that they were fighting for New Mexico and fighting for every dollar in investments in our beautiful state. That's who I've learned from. I'm proud to be from this beautiful state. I grew up here. I'm going to be laid to rest here. New Mexico is in my blood. And look, Mark's going to try to convince you that I forgot about New Mexico. That will never happen. I love this state. I was born and raised here. And I welcome people that have moved here, whether it's been a few years or a few days. But my family is here generationally. We're going to fight with everything that we have to deliver. I hear you. I see you. I want to make sure that I make a difference and make you proud. Keep me in your prayers. Stay strong. God bless you. Please get out and vote. Stay safe. Wear a mask. And let's make sure that we do everyone proud, everyone. Let's come together in New Mexico. You're seeing a lot of back and forth here. And look, Mark and I had a lot of disagreements tonight. But it doesn't have to be that disagreeable. Let's find common ground. In New Mexico, we're best when we come together to solve big problems. And that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about our future. I'm excited about New Mexico's economic future as we work to diversify our economy, bring more manufacturing here, expand the film industry, get more value added with ag, make sure we fight for our acequias and our land grants, that we work in every corner of New Mexico. Our best days are in front of us, but only if we come together. I'm Ben Ray Lujan. I hope I can earn your support to be your United States Senator.
Mr. Ronchetti, 2 minutes as well.
Well, I appreciate the venue here at KOAT. Thanks very much for that. Thanks to the Congressman. I enjoyed our give and take here. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a state where the same things keep happening. And we are more potential than we are progress right now. And the question is, how much longer do we want to keep doing it? How much longer do we want to see someone show up here in New Mexico, tell us how good things can be, and then never deliver on it when they go to DC? You have a choice now. There's no doubt. There's a very clear choice between the two of us. And the congressman talks about bipartisanship, and he votes with Nancy Pelosi 96% of the time. That's not bipartisanship. That's not leadership. That's rising up your own party, increasing your own profile, and leaving the people of this state behind to do it. There's a better way to do this. The way to do it is to listen to you. I've traveled all around this state, and believe me, in COVID, it's different. The groups are small, but we still go to every single county to see what the issues are. And you know what the one thing people say is? Our leaders don't come here anymore. Our leaders don't listen to us anymore. It's almost like we work for them and they don't work for us. That's not going to change if we keep taking the same path with the same people. It's not a personal animus. It's just a difference in the way we view things. I've spent my whole career in this state traveling around talking to New Mexicans. And the reason we got in this race is because you deserve better. Because when you look at a senator, you shouldn't have to say, where do they live again? And then we don't always know why. You talk about our leaders now. Fewer and fewer people feel like they're represented. I will represent you. And Congressman Lujan talks about Pete Domenici. Let me reiterate, Pete Domenici passed 77 bills through the Senate that became law. Ben Ray Lujan has been there for 12 years and never passed a bill into law. It's time to get something done.
Thank you, Mr. Ronchetti and Mr. Lujan, for participating in this debate.
KOAT and the Albuquerque Journal are committed to giving you the information you need to make a decision when you fill out your ballot.
You can watch this again or debates for all 3 New Mexico congressional districts right now at KOAT.com and ABQjournal.com.
Thank you to our radio partners at KKOB for broadcasting this United States Senate debate so more New Mexicans can hear from the candidates. You can early vote through the end of this month, and Election Day is November 3rd.
Thank you and have a good night.